My own mother looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're not fit to be his sister." Then she went back to her soup like it was nothing. No one at the table flinched. No one looked at me. Not my father. Not my younger brother, Evan. Not my aunt or uncle who were visiting from 2 states away. It was like I hadn't heard correctly. Or maybe like I wasn't even there. But I was. I was right there, sitting in the same wooden chair I'd sat in every Sunday dinner since I was a teenager. The one near the window, where the draft always came in. I never got to choose my seat. That spot was always mine, whether I arrived early or late, the cold corner, the extra chair. It had been almost 20 years since I first sat there. Nothing had changed. My hands rested on my lap, clenched tight under the tablecloth. I didn't say a word. I just watched my mother lift her spoon to her mouth, sip slowly, then sigh. Never once said thank you when I covered his car repair so he wouldn't lose his job, which he ended up quitting 2 months later anyway. Now he was in trouble again. Some new debt, some new scheme. They always said I was the cold one, the distant one, the selfish one. But here's what they never said out loud. I was the one who kept things afloat, quietly, without fanfare, without acknowledgement. I was the one who helped Mom refinance the house when Dad's business failed, the one who took care of Grandma when no one else would, the one who skipped vacations, skipped holidays, skipped birthday parties, to work overtime so there was something left in my savings in case the next family emergency came. But when Evan messed up, it was always he's trying his best. When I said no, it was always, she's ungrateful. I could feel my heartbeat thudding in my ears as my mother continued to talk about me like I wasn't there. She should be ashamed, she told my aunt. A real sister would have found a way. Aunt Linda, bless her passive soul, just nodded and sipped her wine. No one ever spoke against my mother, not even when she said things that cut flesh. I didn't eat that night. I couldn't. My appetite had curled into itself like a dying leaf. I stayed until dessert out of habit. Then I stood quietly and picked up my purse. "I'll go," I said. My father glanced up, briefly. "We haven't served the pie yet." I looked at him, wondering if he even remembered my favorite kind. He didn't. "I'm not hungry," I said, then turned toward the door. No one followed me. No one called out. Outside, the night was sharp and still. I sat in my car for a long time, keys in the ignition, headlights off. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But something in me shifted, like a slow, deep crack forming beneath a frozen lake. Because this time, it wasn't just a jab. It wasn't just another dismissive moment or cruel comment disguised as concern. This time, it was a line drawn in front of witnesses. My mother had said it clearly and publicly I wasn't a real sister. And the rest of them had agreed, with their silence, with their forks scraping the bottom of their bowls. When the bank threatened foreclosure and she couldn't qualify for a second mortgage, guess whose name she used to save the property? Mine. It was in the paperwork. It was in the fine print. It was in the lawyer's office, where she cried and said, "Just until we're stable again." Now she served me cold soup and cold judgment in a house that legally belonged to me, a house I had paid for. But they still called it the family home, and I was still just the sister. I smiled politely, but inside something was shifting. I'd stayed quiet long enough. The air in the car was cold. I rolled down the window slightly, letting the night air bite my skin. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to write a long, emotional message. But I was done pretending. Something in me had cracked. And it wasn't going to be glued back together by pie and Sunday dinner. Not this time. I wasn't always the sister who said no. In fact, I was the one who always said yes. Yes, I'll help with his homework. Yes, I'll walk him to school. Yes, I'll give up my birthday party so we can afford his piano lessons, the ones he never finished. Yes, I'll take the blame when he breaks something and cries. I was 6 when Evan was born. I still remember the moment they brought him home. My mother walked past me, clutching him to her chest like a porcelain prize. My father followed with the bags. No one looked at me. I stood in the hallway, holding the drawing I made of our new family, stick figures with big smiles. I had drawn myself holding Evan's hand. That picture never made it onto the fridge. By the time I was 10, I knew the routine. Claire, keep him quiet. Claire, help him with his bath. Claire, go grab diapers. Claire, don't ask for anything right now. Your brother is sick. He was always sick, or tired, or fragile, or just more important. It became my identity, the second one. The helper, the filler, the background. When other kids at school were talking about soccer practice and playdates, I was folding laundry, stirring the soup, used to getting hand-me-downs while he got brand new shoes because he's growing faster. Used to hearing Claire, you're older, you should know better. That phrase, you should know better. It haunted me into adulthood. I worked harder, always. I got straight A's, took AP classes, applied for scholarships, never asked for help. When I got into a state university, fully funded by grants and part-time jobs, my parents didn't come to the orientation. Evan had a game that day. I moved into a dorm alone. He never paid me back. Not once. I started keeping a spreadsheet. Not because I wanted to guilt him, just to know, to remember. No acknowledgement that I was holding things together in the background while he lived his mess loudly and unapologetically. One time, I came home for Thanksgiving and overheard my mother talking on the phone in the kitchen. She's not like Evan, she said. She's not warm. She's always so distant. I stood there, holding a bag of groceries I had just bought for them. My arms ached. My throat burned. I was distant? They called me distant because I didn't collapse at their feet every time they snapped their fingers, because I didn't chase their love like Evan did. He always needed, and I always provided. That was the difference, but I wasn't warm enough. Not enough to be seen. When Mom and Dad got behind on the mortgage, I was the one who stepped in. They were going to lose the house. The one with the creaky porch and the broken fence I had painted twice in high school. The one they loved to call ours until it came time to pay for it. Evan had just totaled his car. Couldn't help. Dad's credit was shot. Mom didn't qualify a loan. So they came to me. It'll just be in your name on paper, Mom said sweetly, just to help us qualify for refinancing. I was 32, working full-time, living in a rental I could barely afford. And still, I said yes. I signed. I paid the closing fees. I co-signed the agreement. I transferred money when they came up short the first month. The one writing lists while he made promises. The one bleeding quietly while he shouted and got bandaged. I used to think, maybe next time they'll see me. Maybe next Christmas, they'd get me something I actually liked. Maybe next phone call, they'd ask how I was doing. Maybe next birthday, they'd remember. Evan had invited half the neighborhood to my parents' backyard, burgers, beers, loud music, football on the projector. I had stopped by just to say hello, to make an appearance. I left before anyone could say another word. The drive home felt different. I didn't feel guilt. Not the way I usually did. What I felt was silence. Peaceful, empty silence. It was addicting. Over the next few weeks, I kept pulling away. I stopped answering Evan's late-night texts. I didn't show up for Sunday dinners. I turned down requests to help Mom figure out her taxes or talk to the phone company for Dad. I didn't make excuses. I didn't explain. And no one really asked. I needed time to remember who I was when I wasn't everyone's safety net, but I didn't get that time. I had just come home from work, still in my blazer, heels off at the door. My phone rang, an unknown number. Hi, is this Claire Bennett? Yes. This is Jennifer Morales from Clearview Bank. A strange, cold kind of clarity that comes when you realize that the people you love aren't just careless, they're dangerous. That night, I didn't sleep. I reviewed every transaction, every old email. It felt like cutting cords, dozens of invisible strings that had held me in place for years, one snip at a time. No drama, no shouting, just freedom. It didn't take long for the panic to start. Just straight to the problem, as if I were still the family tech support. I didn't answer. Then my mother texted, Claire, the gas bill is overdue. Can you look into that? No one said we did something wrong. They just wanted things fixed. As usual. But I wasn't their fixer anymore. I was done. I went back to my lawyer the following week. We drafted a formal notification to the bank, asserting my sole ownership of the Oak Ridge Lane house. We froze all activity on the property and opened an internal investigation into the forged loan documents. I made sure the letter was delivered to both my parents and Evan. 2 days later, the silence cracked. Mom called again, 8 times. Then Evan texted, WTF is going on with the house loan? Why is your lawyer involved? No hi. No what happened. Just entitlement, confusion. They hadn't even thought to ask me before forging my name. Now they were confused because I wasn't fixing it. I replied to Evan's message with a single sentence. You'll need to speak to my lawyer. I passed families laughing, kids on scooters, couples with takeout in their hands. I felt a strange calmness. Not happiness. Not yet. But something lighter than before. Something like beginning. The next morning, my father finally called. He rarely called. It was always Mom or Evan. He liked to stay above the mess, let others handle the details. But this time, his voice was tight. Claire, he said, we need to talk. No, I said. He paused. This is serious. So am I. There was a long silence. We didn't mean to hurt you, he said eventually. We just thought you'd help, like always. I did help, I said, for years, quietly, consistently. I helped until I had nothing left to give. We're your family, he said. No, I said. You're people who took advantage of that word. I hung up before he could say anything else. I sat at the kitchen table, phone still in hand, and just breathed. It didn't feel triumphant, not yet, but it felt right. For the first time in my life, I was standing up without raising my voice, and they were finally hearing me because I had stopped speaking. The invitation came like a bad habit, casual, assuming, full of expectation. Family dinner on Sunday, just us. Come early if you can. It was from my mother. No apology, no mention of what had happened. No acknowledgement of forged signatures or frozen accounts. Just dinner, as if the silence hadn't happened, as if I hadn't hired a lawyer to protect myself from the people who once raised me. I almost deleted the message, but something made me pause. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the need to look them in the eye and say what I had held in for 3 decades. Maybe I just needed to see if they'd dare pretend again. Sunday evening came. I wore black again like I had at that last dinner, except this time not for mourning. For power, I arrived on time. I parked in the driveway, not around the corner like I used to. I walked through the front door without knocking. They were already gathered in the dining room. Mom, Dad, Evan, the same faces, the same table, the same candle holders. But something was different. Me, Claire, Mom said, getting up. She almost smiled. We're so glad you came. I didn't hug her. I didn't smile. I sat down, pulled a folder from my bag and laid it on the table. The same way they once laid blame at my feet, I now placed facts at theirs. No more metaphors. No more emotional gymnastics. Just black and white. Truth. What's this? Dad asked, his voice steady but eyes already scanning. Proof, I said, calm, unshaken. They opened the folder. Page by page, the forged loan, the signature comparison, the bank's fraud report, the motion to remove them from all property-related authority, the final letter from my attorney notifying them of intent to initiate legal consequences if repayment or transfer is not reversed within 14 days. No one spoke. I let them read. Let the weight of their actions pile on in silence. Then I said it, not loud, not cruel, just, finally, you forged my name. You used my house as collateral. You lied, and you expected me to clean it up. Claire, Mom said, but her voice was already unraveling. I looked at her, directly. No softness. You looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't fit to be Evan's sister. But you had no problem using me to keep this house. Evan flinched. It wasn't like that, you knew, I said. You always knew. You just never thought I'd fight back. He looked down. For the first time in years, he had no words. Dad cleared his throat. Can't we just talk about this like a family? Family? The first repeated. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't erase you and then come calling when the bills hit. I stood. The room was heavy with their shame. Not guilt. Shame. Because this time, I hadn't come to ask for love or approval. I came to end the transaction. I'm done, I said. This is the last time I'll step foot in this house unless it's with a real estate agent, Mom gasped. You can't be serious. I'm very serious, I replied. You'll be receiving a formal notice of property transfer. You have 30 days to vacate, or legal proceedings will begin. You'd kick us out? Dad asked, stunned. You already did, I said. The moment you chose money over me, over truth, Over decency, they begged. Of course they did. Mom switched to tears. Dad tried logic. Evan even said he'd pay me back, which was rich, considering he owed me thousands. But I didn't bend. I didn't yell. I didn't insult. I just handed them the truth, wrapped in legal documents and years of repressed dignity, and walked out the front door. Without looking back, on the porch I breathed. Not a heavy, exhausted breath. A clean one, like air after a storm. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from my lawyer. All documents filed. You're fully protected. Let me know if you want to proceed with property reclaim. Timing is in your hands. I stared at the screen, and for the first time, I felt something new. Power. Not over them. Over my life. 2 weeks after I walked out of that house, my lawyer sent me a simple message. The paperwork has been accepted. The eviction process is moving forward. I stared at the words for a long time. It felt surreal. Not triumphant. Not cruel. Just quiet. Like the final breath of something that had taken up too much space for too long. I didn't celebrate. I didn't blast music or toast champagne. I just sat with it. Let the silence sink into my bones. They were leaving. They had no choice now. And I didn't feel guilty. Because they had already left me, long before I ever filed a thing. I heard through a cousin that Evan moved in with a friend across town, someone who wasn't charging him rent yet, but probably would once the novelty wore off. Dad had been forced to liquidate a few investments. Mom was seen at the community center asking about part-time office jobs. None of that pleased me. It just proved what I already knew. They weren't incapable. They were just unwilling, as long as I was available. And now that I wasn't, they were adapting. Because people always do. I didn't block their numbers. But I didn't answer either. There were messages, some angry, some pleading. We didn't think it would go this far. Can we at least talk like adults? You're breaking the family apart. But the family had been broken for years. I was just the first one to stop pretending it wasn't. Instead, I focused on small things. I bought myself a plant. It died within a week. So I bought 2 more. They lived. I started journaling again. Not about them. About me. About the way sunlight looked on my kitchen counter in the mornings. About the way I could breathe deeper when I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. About the way I no longer felt like I owed the world an explanation for choosing peace. I moved out of my old apartment. Found a little place near the edge of town. A quiet house with creaky floors and a crooked mailbox that reminded me of my childhood home, minus the memories. It wasn't big, but it was mine. Really, truly mine. No signatures from anyone else. No obligations buried in the fine print. I painted the walls soft gray, put up bookshelves, let myself sit in silence without the buzz of guilt in my ears. I made space for myself, not just physically, but emotionally. And slowly, I filled it with the kind of life I had never thought I deserved. One afternoon, I got a knock on the door. It was Evan. I didn't open it fully, just stood behind the screen. He looked tired, not pathetic, just tired. The kind of tired that came from living without a net for the first time in your life. I just wanted to say I get it now, he said. I didn't answer. I didn't before. I thought you were just being cold. But you were right. About all of it. Still, I said nothing. I'm not here to ask for money, he added quickly. Or a place to stay. I'm trying. He looked down at his hands. I'm really trying, I watched him. For a moment, I wanted to believe it. Wanted to feel something, relief, maybe. Validation. But what I felt was simpler. Peace. I hope you mean that, I said. He nodded. Then he left. I didn't close the door right away. I just stood there, letting the air flow in. A few days later, I got a letter. From my mother. No return address. Just her handwriting, neat and a little shaky. Inside was a folded piece of paper. 2 sentences. We didn't mean for it to turn out like this. I hope you can forgive us someday. No signature, no apology, no responsibility. Just hope. I didn't respond. Some things don't need answers. Some doors stay closed not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. Some days it still stings. Like when I hear someone say, my mom called me this morning, or my brother surprised me with coffee. I still catch myself wondering what it might have felt like to be held without condition, to be loved not for what I could provide, but for who I was. But those thoughts pass quicker now. They no longer define me. They're just echoes. And I've learned how to live beyond the echo. It's been almost a year now, a year since I walked out of that house with nothing but a folder in my hand and every piece of dignity I could gather. Since then, my life has gotten quieter, not easier, not perfect, but honest. I wake up most mornings to the sound of birds outside my window. I never noticed how many kinds of birds there were until I had time, real time, to listen. My coffee tastes different now. Not rushed, not reheated 3 times in between phone calls and guilt. Warm, whole, mine. I started something new, a tiny side business. More of a passion project, really. Custom planners and journals, I call it second page, because that's what I'm living now. Not the beginning, not the mess in the middle, but the second page, the one I chose to write myself. Lena, an old college friend I reconnected with, helps me ship orders on the weekends. We sit at my kitchen table with boxes and tape and tea, talking about everything and nothing. There's no performance with her, no pretending. She asks how I'm really doing, and she listens to the answer. Sometimes I wonder what it would have felt like to grow up with someone like Lena as a sister. Someone who saw me, who didn't take advantage of my silence. But I don't linger on that thought. Because I've learned something important, you can miss what you never had and still not want it back. The house is peaceful now. The walls don't echo with unspoken tension. The rooms don't remember every fight and favor. I've made new memories here, simple ones. A rainy night reading by the window. One morning, I stood in the yard, barefoot, holding a mug of tea, and realized something that made me still. I hadn't thought about them in days. Not out of anger, just because my life no longer revolves around pain. That's when I knew I was healing. Not healed, not fully, but healing the kind that doesn't require anyone else's permission. I used to believe love was something I had to earn, that if I gave enough, proved enough, sacrificed enough, someone would choose me. Someone would finally say, "You're enough." But that's not love. That's debt. And I'm done being in debt to people who never intended to pay me back emotionally or otherwise. Love, I've learned, is quiet. It shows up in small ways. A friend who remembers your favorite tea, a neighbor who brings you soup when you're sick, yourself buying a new pillow just because it makes your neck feel better. Love doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be real. So if you're reading this or hearing this and you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, let me tell you something no one ever told me. You are not too much. You are not too cold. You are not too selfish. You are simply someone who deserves to be seen. And if your family can't see you, build your own. From friends, from strangers who become safe spaces, from yourself. Because blood doesn't define family, respect does. And peace. Peace comes when you stop begging people to love you and start loving yourself the way you always deserved. Now I water my plants on Sundays. I write thank you notes to customers I've never met. I take deep breaths before bed and dream without guilt. I'm not rich, I'm not famous, but I am free. And after everything, that is more than enough.